We close this week in talking about how Jesus is the vine and how he is looking for us as his disciples to bear much fruit. Well, and what kind of fruit is he looking for? Well, as I mentioned in the sermon, the primary fruit is love, because that's what the vine is all about. God is love, and Jesus shares God's love. And so our final passage is one that I've used many times doing these devotions, Galatians 5, verses 22 to 23, where Paul is writing about the fruit of the Spirit, when he says, by contrast, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. There is no law against such things. Honestly, these verses are some of the most important verses in the Bible to me and my personal faith and my understanding of God and what God is looking for from me as a disciple, what God's looking for from you, what God's looking for from his people, the church, is we are to be the people who are producing the fruit of the Spirit. And it's in contrast to what Paul earlier in Galatians 5 calls the works of the flesh. And he says those are obvious, and those include things like impurity, idolatry, enmity, strife, jealousy, angry, quarrels, dissensions, factions, envy, drunkenness, carousing, and things like that. That's just not the way we as Christians are to live. It's not the sort of behavior and virtues we're to demonstrate, because they aren't virtues, they're vices. And it's interesting, and I'm going to do a sermon on this sometime. It's interesting how many things that used to be considered vices are no longer considered vices. One of the musical groups I have in my iTunes that I like to listen to when I work out is an American band from the 70s called the Doobie Brothers. And one of their album titles from the early 70s, so it's like 50 years ago now, is What Once Were Vices Now Are Habits. And I said to Jill, wow, isn't that true? What once were vices have now become habits. That's not what God wants from us. God wants to see the fruit of the Spirit. I encourage you to have the fruit of the Spirit like on an index card on your refrigerator, so you see them every time you go to get something to eat. You see love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, or generosity, depending on your translation, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. I want these virtues to be growing in my life day by day, week by week, year by year. And so do you, and so does God. Be a fruitful member of God's family and God's vineyard and of the vine that is Jesus, and bear fruit that gives him joy today.